Is PARSHA's Beshalach. So just as we remember where we are, the Jewish people have left Egypt, and they're not very far out. I believe at this point they're probably less than a week, and they haven't gotten to the splitting of the Red Sea, which of course is the 60th day after they leave, and that's about to happen. So it begins by Beshalach Paro es Am, when Pharaoh sent out the people. Below Nachem Elokim Derech Eretz Plishtim. So it says in English, it tells us that Hashem did not lead them by way of the Plishtim, Ki Korovhu, because it was close. So this whole sentence has to be looked at. First thing, Vayihi Beshalach Paro, when Pharaoh sent the nation. Clearly, I don't think we would say that Pharaoh sent out the Jewish people, even though we told them you should go. Really, it really wasn't his choice. I mean, Hashem does 10 plagues. The last of the 10 plagues, he kills the firstborn. I'd say when Hashem took the people out, what happened. It wasn't the Pharaoh said, well, you know what? Maybe I'll keep them for a while. He didn't say that, right? He didn't say it because if he did, the next thing is that he'd be dead. So it's funny that the Torah, that God himself says that when Pharaoh sent out the people, so we have to understand that. Then the next part is totally odd. It says he didn't send them by the land of the Plishtim because it was close. You'd say, well, that's why you would send them. If you want to go somewhere, you want to go from here to Mississauga, you go the fastest way, the easiest way, the closest way. You don't want to go, well, let's see, what's the longest way I can get to Mississauga from here? That's the way I'm going to go. No one's going to do that unless you don't want to get there. So why does it say that Hashem didn't send them by way of the Plishtim? Because it's close. V'Amar Elokim, and Hashem says, Pen yinachem ha'am b'rosa milchama, and then he gives us a reason why that he doesn't send them by way of the land of the Plishtim. He says because it would be if the people would see that if there's a war, then what'll happen? V'shavu Mitzrayim, they'll go back to Egypt. So if they go by the way of the Plishtim is a nation, right? The Philistines, they go by way of the Plishtim are going to declare war on them. The Jewish people are going to get afraid, and they're going to want to go back to Egypt, right? Which of course Hashem doesn't want them going back to Egypt. So therefore he doesn't send them that way because it's close. So it doesn't really seem to tell you because it's close. What do you need to know because it's close? He doesn't send them by way of the Plishtim because if the Plishtim declare war, the Jews will want to go back to Egypt. So if it's close, so they can go back to Egypt, right? It's because it's close. But it doesn't really seem to tell us anything special by telling us where it is. And we have to see why the Torah tells us that. And then it goes on. So then it says how they went. He took them by way of the desert, by Yamsuf, by the Red Sea, and then it says that the Jewish people came up from the land of Egypt with chamushim. Now chamushim is a funny word. They don't know exactly for sure what the meaning is because it can mean many things. Chamushim could be chamesh, five, something that is referred to as the five, right? The five things. What does that mean? They came up with 5 things. So the commentaries explain it a number of ways. They tell us Ein chamushim ella mizonim. So Rashi says whenever it says the word chamushim, it means weapons, that the Jewish people were given weapons, right, in order to defend themselves. So when the Jewish people left Egypt, they left armed. That's one. Another commentary tells us chamushim means chamesh, means like they carried the 5 books of the Torah. Right, like the Torah itself, which is 5 books. Of course, they haven't gotten the Torah yet. That's not till next week's Parsha. So it's talking about in a spiritual sense that the Jewish people went out armed with the Torah. They went out fulfilling their purpose of why they were put into the world. And Rashi's commentary says that it's because they came out with weapons, so they could defend themselves. So let's stop at that point and see if we can understand a bit of what's happening. So there are many midrashim that deal with this first sentence, especially with when Pharaoh sent the Jewish people out of Egypt. When clearly Pharaoh did not send them out, they went, and God took them out. So it says that Pharaoh wakes up one day, right? He realizes, what did we do? We have all this free labor. We have all these people here, and we sent them out. Right? In other words, his point is that a person themselves, right, any one of us, we are subjective beings. And in my mind, I'm Pharaoh and I'm all-powerful. And if the Jewish people left, there's only one way they left. No matter what the facts are not are not pertinent. The Jewish people left Egypt because I let them go. That's how Pharaoh sees it. That's in his head. That's how you could have sometimes a conversation with someone, and you could both have seen the same thing, and they will tell you it's totally different than what you know. Right? You can have instances where you can have interactions with people where both people are acting inappropriately. Both of them are being insulting to each other. And you talk to either one of them, and they'll tell you, the other one was insulting, but I wasn't. And you heard them both. You could hear they're both insulting. But in the mind of the individual himself, he doesn't believe he was. He believes, I'm right. I didn't do anything wrong. I'm right here. That person offended me. And the other person will say, I didn't do anything wrong. That person offended me. And in reality, it can't be that happened in such a way. Especially if you saw it, you can see they both were acting inappropriately. What happens is when a person themselves can make ourselves believe anything. We can cause ourselves to believe we're never wrong. We can cause ourselves to believe that in any situation, we're the victim. We're not the perpetrator. When in reality, very often we can be the perpetrator, or we can at least have some amount of responsibility. But subjectively, we do this to ourselves all the time. Right? That's why the Talmud says, no person can see their own pimples. This is an expression the Talmud uses, which means that when a person looks at themselves, they don't see their flaws. They see the goodness in them, in themselves. So therefore, if I have a problem with someone, I don't know why they don't like me. I didn't do anything to them. I don't know why they're acting this way. There's something wrong with them. That's why they do this. That's what a person would say. That's how Pharaoh was. Pharaoh had 10 plagues happen to him. It was clear at this point to Pharaoh, he was not stronger than God. That no matter what Pharaoh said said he was God. Pharaoh said he knows all the other gods. Pharaoh said that everything is up to him. Reality is, at this point, Pharaoh objectively knew that he was beat by God. And nevertheless, a few days later, Pharaoh wakes up and said, what did I do? I let him out. I shouldn't have let him out. Right? And that's why it says that Pharaoh sent the nation, because in his eyes, he sent them out. Even though that's totally absurd. Nobody could believe that Pharaoh just decided one day, these Jews aren't worth their time, get rid of them. So some of the commentaries say that that's also not so easy to believe, although I think that that's pretty realistic, because it teaches us a lot about people, about ourselves. But they say that what Pharaoh was doing was like, let's give an example. Like one time when I was in Israel on a trip once, and they have a place in Israel up in the north. It's called Canada House. And it's a building that was built by Jews in Toronto or in Canada, but many, since it is the big city, a lot of it came from here. And they built basically like a Jewish community center for these Jews who live right on the border in the north, where it's not a great place to live. I mean, you've got a security gate going right through the edge of the city. You've got, they could put a bomb into this city and not even enter the country. That's how close it is. Right? They can throw it. They're so close. So they said they wanted to make it easier for these people living in such a terrible place, such a difficult place. So they built this Jewish community center. And one of the things they built, being Canadian, is they built a hockey rink. There's a hockey rink in the middle of this place. It's like you go in the desert. There's a hockey rink. For all the places they have a hockey rink, but that's Canadians. They wanted to, they said, we've got something to share with the world. Hockey, we're going to share. So we're going to give the Jews in Metula way up in the north, we're going to give them a hockey rink. So of course they can give them a hockey rink all they want, but they can't give them a coach. Where are they going to find a hockey coach in Israel, since they don't have hockey in Israel? So they didn't know what to do. In the meantime, all these Russian Jews are coming out of Russia, right, and they're coming to Israel. And in Russia, of course, they have hockey, and they have all different types of things. And they come to Israel, they need a job, so they just take jobs. Right? They're not going to necessarily get a job in their own field. They're refugees. They want to work. They don't want to take charity, and they want to be able to do a job, and they want to be able to support their families. So you have people doing all kinds of jobs. So there was a guy in Tel Aviv, and he worked for the sanitation department of the city. Like his job was like to sweep streets. I don't know if he actually swept the street. I've never seen anyone do that, but that kind of thing. He was a sanitation worker for the city. But really, when this guy was in the USSR, he was the hockey coach for the Olympics. He was a really high level hockey coach. But what did Israel know from a hockey coach? They didn't have hockey. So now suddenly they have hockey. Right? And it comes around that this guy spoke to someone, and suddenly they realize they have this guy who trained the Russian hockey team for the Olympics, is sweeping streets in Tel Aviv. So they got him to go up to Metula. So you can imagine, like, the mayor in Tel Aviv is saying, like, oh, I had this hockey coach, this amazing hockey coach, and what did I do with him? I had him sweeping streets. What a waste, right? I paid him to sweep streets. I had this amazing hockey coach. You imagine what we could have done with him if we had used him correctly from day one. But we didn't understand. We didn't know. That's what some of the commentators say is what Pharaoh is saying here. Pharaoh is saying, he's saying, I sent out the Jewish people. I sent out the Jewish people. That's a terrible thing, right? He didn't really think that he sent them out. He knew that they went out. But what he's saying is that when I had the Jewish people here, I wasted them. You have these people who understood finance, who understand how the world works, and I made them into slaves. They were sweeping the streets of Egypt. They were building pyramids. They were out in the desert trying to build a pyramid without any bricks. Right, so this idea, as Pharaoh was saying, what a waste. I could have gained so much more from them, and I didn't. It's like I wasted. I sent them away for nothing. Right, and so then, because he finally comes to the realization of what he lost. So the message is not that he tricks himself into thinking he sent them out. In this one, the message was that finally you don't know what you got till it's gone, and it's gone now. And he realizes I had these people who could have helped me run the country so much better, and I used them as slave labor. It was so silly of me. And that's what other commentary says, that Pharaoh comes to that realization. And therefore, no matter which opinion you want to follow, it makes sense now that Pharaoh goes after them. He gets, as it says here in the PARSHA, it says that the Jewish people go up and he goes after them. But to get it into order, if we just follow a few more sentences, we see, so it says that Hashem turns the people into the wilderness to the Sea of Reeds. Now the Sea of Reeds is what most of us colloquially call the Red Sea. But the fact is that the Red Sea did not split. The Reed Sea split. It's not the same. It's a mistake. People translate it wrong, because Suf doesn't mean red. Edom means red. Suf means reed, right? And therefore, we're talking about the Reed Sea, and that's why it's translated here the Sea of Reeds, and that's what later we know split.
Where is the Sea of Reeds?
Well, that's if you look on the map, it shows you between Egypt and Israel, and there is right at the beginning, right by Egypt, there is such a place. We may call it the Red Sea.
Oh, right.
Right, but it's not. That's not the name of it. It's the Reed Sea is the name of it.
Okay.
It's just that we've gotten used to calling it that.
Oh, but it's the
There's nothing red about it.
Okay.
Right. So the next line is very interesting, and it says, the children of Israel were armed, as I said, when they went up from Egypt. Moses took the bones of Joseph with him. Right? And it says, Vayikach Moshe es atzamos Yosef imo. He took the bones of Yosef with him. Why? Because we know earlier from a few parshas back that before Yosef dies, he asks the Jewish people of that time, which are his brothers and his nephews and his children, to please don't leave him here. After he dies, don't bury him in Egypt. Bury me instead in Israel. So when the Jewish people leave, I'm going with you. So it says that Moshe himself went and took the casket of Yosef. And there are many, many famous midrashim, many famous stories about this happening. It says that the Jews actually, they took Yosef and they embalmed him and they put him into the Nile. And they buried him in the Nile, and then when it was time to go, they took the casket out of the Nile, right, and they were able to take it with them. So it's what everybody asks, like, why does it tell us that Moshe took him, and why did Moshe take him? He has all these millions of people going with him, and he was the leader of the Jewish nation. So what we see is that the Jewish people left Egypt, as we know, with great wealth. We read it in last week's Parsha, that they went, and Hashem made it that the non-Jews of Egypt liked the Jews and gave them gifts and gave them all their wealth. So it says that they left with a lot of wealth because God promised Abraham, your children will be slaves in a foreign land and they will leave there with great wealth. So God made it possible that they would have great wealth, and they took out wealth. So every person is leaving with gold and silver and jewels and all kinds of wealth as the slaves are leaving. They basically got paid for all their work. However, Moshe doesn't do that. Moshe goes out with the bones of Yosef. That's what he's carrying. So it says that a wise person understands the worth of things. It says that Moshe understood that while the Jewish people saw that diamonds and gold were worth a lot, he says in the ultimate world, fulfilling a promise is worth more. Taking Yosef to Egypt, because we promised to take him, we took an oath that we would take him, that's worth more in the ultimate world of God's world, rather than the world of commerce and the world that we live in. That was worth more. They tell a story. I'm not sure where the source of the story is. I've seen it at many places, and the story is as follows: that there was a man living in Europe, let's say, and he had a family, but he was destitute. He just didn't have any money. No matter what job he did, what he did, he never was able to make the money he needed just to live. And his family were starving. So he comes across a person who's like this very rich person. He asks him, "How did you get so rich?" The person said, "Oh, well, I went to this island, which is far away from here, and this island, they have diamonds just laying in the sand. And if you go to that island, you take some diamonds and come back, you can sell the diamonds, you'll be a rich man the rest of your life." So the man doesn't have money to get on a boat. He doesn't have anything. So he tells his family, and they go to work, and they save every little bit to be able to go on this ship, to go to this faraway island, which is very far. And a ship only goes once a year. So he finally saves up and saves up and saves up, and he has enough money to buy the cheapest ticket to go to this island and back. So he buys the ticket, he gets on the boat, and he goes for a long time on this ship, right, going all the way to this island somewhere on the other side of the world. And he gets off, and it's true. Here he's in this place, and in the sand are diamonds. Everywhere he looks are diamonds. So he just starts gathering these diamonds and filling up a sack with diamonds. And he realizes now, he's been here for like a day. He hasn't eaten anything. So he wants to go find where the other people are who live in this island, and he can buy some food. He's a millionaire. He's got all these diamonds. So he goes into the city with his bag of diamonds, and he wants to buy something to eat. So he goes into a store, and he says, "Okay, I'd like to have a lunch. How much is lunch?" And they say to him, "Well, it's a certain amount of money." And he says, "That's no problem. I've got a sack full of diamonds, like a whole sack full." They said, "Diamonds? What are you, an idiot? Diamonds are on the street. They're not worth anything to us. Diamonds are like sand. You don't buy anything with sand. Everybody's got diamonds. You know how you can what our commerce is? Money is animal fat. If you get animal fat on this island where we have very few animals, that's worth money. So if you want to buy breakfast, you're going to have to pay a certain weight of animal fat. Diamonds don't do nothing here. It's no good." So the man doesn't know what to do, and he goes and he starts working, and somebody gives him some fat, and he has enough to live on. But now he starts trying to find a way, and he goes and it grows, and he's working and working and working, and he's very successful in getting this animal fat. He's able to get animals and breed animals and grow the animals and then kill the animals and get the fat, and they use the fat for cooking, for heating, for all kinds of things. So the guy's becoming a multi-millionaire in animal fat. Right? Now he's now there for a couple of years, right? And he's this really rich guy who always has this sad feeling in the back of his head. I left my wife and kids behind back in Europe, and here I am, this rich man. He says, "I have to go back." So he gathers together all his animal fat, and he fills up all these sacks full of the animal fat because he's so rich with animal fat. And he's been here for 5 years, and he's now like the wealthiest man. And he takes burlap bags and he fills them up with the fat, and he waits for the boat to come, which comes only once a year. He takes all of his animal fat in the burlap bags and puts it on the boat, and he gets on the boat, and the boat, off it goes. And it takes months to get home. In the meantime, in the sun, the animal fat spoils. And you can imagine how it would smell, burlap bags full of animal fat. And he gets all the way around the world. He goes back to where he is, and there's his wife and his kids waiting anxiously for him. He's been gone so long. He was also going to go 1 year just to go get the diamonds and get on the next time the ship comes and come back. And he's gone for years, and and finally they're starving to death. And he comes back, and they're going to have a good life now. And he gets off the boat, and they've got. And he says, and he's so happy, and he says, "Oh, it's great. I've come back, and I gathered all the wealth, and here it is on the ship." And he shows them he's got like 200 burlap bags full of animal fat, and it's all stinks because it was in the sun, and it's all spoiled. And they said to him, "Animal fat? What good is animal fat? Animal fat's not worth anything. You went to get diamonds. Where's the diamonds?" And he suddenly realizes what he did. that he got confused. When he went there, he got the diamonds, but there, diamonds aren't worth anything, because everybody has diamonds. So he gets animal fat there, which is worth something. Now he comes back here, animal fat's not worth anything, diamonds are. And he got confused, and he brought back the animal fat, and he didn't bring back the diamonds, because where he was, diamonds aren't worth anything. So he's so distraught by what he did. His family has been waiting for 5-6 years for him, and they put up all their money for him to go, and he comes back with spoiled animal fat. He passes out right there. He faints right in the street, and he wakes up in the hospital, and everybody's happy. And they said, why are they happy? You know, I mean, I destroyed my family. And then they said that when they brought him to the hospital, they went through his clothes. They found one diamond in one pair of pants that he missed. They didn't, you know, it was there. And that diamond was big enough to support the family for the rest of their life. So the commentaries who talk about the story say what this story is telling you is the same idea. We live in this world. In this world, the currency to buy anything is money. You need money, gold, right? Whatever, however you want to see the money, you need money, and so we work to get money. But we're fooling ourselves, because this world is like that island. This isn't the real world that the whole purpose of life is. The whole purpose of life is in the world to come. So we're working here, and we're acquiring more and more money, but you can't take the money with you. Cash is worth nothing in the world to come. What's worth something in the world to come are mitzvahs. A wise person takes mitzvahs with him, because that's the diamonds in the world to come. So sure, you need money. Nobody tells you that there's anything wrong with having money. Money is not bad, right? But that's not the goal of life. That's a means. If you don't have money, you can't buy a lulav. If you don't have money, you can't buy kosher food. You can't give tzedakah. You can't do anything without money. But money is not the goal. Money is the means. The mitzvahs are the goal. So that's the message that Moshe is sending. Moshe is saying that all of the Jews took their diamonds and their gold and their silver and everything, right? But Moshe says that the real important thing is to take the bones of Yosef. That's the mitzvahs. The wise person takes mitzvahs with him. And Moshe was a wise man. He took the mitzvahs. He took Yosef, right? So that all the Jewish people should realize that was the case. Now, the Medrash says, an interesting thing, there's a psalm, Tehillim, that we say, it's a part of Hallel, but it's a very well-read psalm that King David wrote, and it says that Hayam Ravianos. Right? It says when the Jews came out of Egypt, King David says the sea saw and it ran. It means it split. Right? The sea saw the Jewish people coming, and it split. Right? Right? Which is a miracle. Right? Water doesn't split. Water always settles to the lowest point. It split. So King David's saying how amazing it was that the sea saw and split. So the Gemara asks, and the Medrash asks, what did it see? Like I just told you, it saw the Jewish people, but leave that aside. What did it see? What did the sea see? Right? That made it split? What was it? So there's all different answers, but one of the answers was it saw the casket of Joseph. Right? Moshe brought the casket of Joseph with him. The sea saw the casket of Joseph and it split. Well, what does that tell you? That it saw that and it split? Why? What does the casket of Joseph have to do with water splitting? So it says that Joseph, we know from early parshas that Joseph it says he was a nar, he was like a boy, an adolescent, and he used to spend time in his house combing his hair and making sure he looked nice. Because Yosef he knew he was a nice looking man, and it was important to him to look good. So the Torah tells you that it was maybe a little bit too much. That's why it tells you that he really, was sort of enthralled with his own looks. And we know from the next few parshas after that the women were the same. The women would look at him and they were just amazed. Such a beautiful man, a handsome man. So it says that in Egypt the women used to stare at him, and then of course Potiphar's wife, where he was working, tried to seduce him. Right? That's how the whole story. So it says that. But what did Yosef do? Here's Yosef, a man who is taken by his family and sold. So as far as he knows, they don't want him. And he's a very handsome man, and he has nobody around him. He has no family, he has nobody. And these women want him. So why not? I'll have relations with all of them. Why not? I mean, what's going to stop me? Because no one's going to know. My father's not here. My brothers aren't here. What's the difference? I'll do whatever I want. I can get away with it. I'm a stranger. But we see that Yosef not only doesn't engage in these things, he doesn't engage in these things, and because of it, He ends up going to jail. Remember, that's Potiphar's wife, because he wouldn't sleep with her. When she threw herself at him, she says, "I'm going to get you." And she tells her husband that he tried to rape her, and he ends up going to jail. All right, and he's in jail, and that's how the whole story happens with him, with meeting the people in the jail, and he deciphers their dreams, and they take him to Pharaoh, and he deciphers their dreams. So everything that happens to the Jewish people happens because of that incident and the fact that Yosef would not do something wrong. But yet we know from his personality that he was very enthralled with himself, and that it would have been very much expected that he would do something wrong, and yet he didn't. The fact that he went against his own nature shows us how the strength he had to do the right thing. Now, there are times, like in our lives, when we have issues that happen, and we can see in front of ourselves. It's very rare that it's black and white, but there are times when we know this is what I should do, and this is what I want to do. Right? And sometimes it's very hard to do what we should do, right? And we very much want to do what we want to do. It could be anything from not, the kids call us and we can pretend we're sleeping, right? And not go because I'm so tired, and I let my husband go or my wife go, or something even bigger, right? Where I'll do what I want to do, not do what I should do. I should do this, and I'm really do this. Right? Yosef did what he should do, and there was no reason other than his belief that it was the right thing. That he went against his nature, and he did the right thing. And because of it, all of these amazing things happened, including the Jews coming out of Egypt, because that's how it happened. The sea also, its nature is to settle to the lowest point and to be one. That's what water does. So the water said, if Yosef, so to speak, if Yosef could go against his nature and rise up to the level of doing what's right because it's right, then I'm going to also go against my nature, and I'm going to split for Yosef when he comes, and his casket is what it saw. So this idea shows us the importance of it. There's also another medrash that says that that splitting of the Red Sea is as difficult. It is as difficult to make a shidduch, to make a couple, a man and a woman, right, to get married, to create a shidduch. It is as difficult as it is to split the sea. You can imagine to split a sea has got to be very, very difficult, right? I mean, it's to try to split a little drop of water is not so simple. A whole sea, right, is an enormous undertaking, right? That's how hard it is to find the right groom and bride and bring them together, right? That's how hard it is, right? To find that, it's very difficult. But some of the commentaries I saw say that's a misunderstanding. Most people understand the statement as meaning what I just said. It is as hard to create a couple for marriage as it is to split the Red Sea. But he says that's not what it means. What it means is it is hard to sustain a marriage as it is to split the Red Sea. And this medrash now makes a lot more sense, because to create a bride and a groom that can get along with each other and that could get married is certainly not easy. But to say that it's that hard, that's not the case. What's really difficult is to take two people who are very different. They come from different families. They may have somewhat similar backgrounds or somewhat similar culture, but they're going to be different, right? One of them, pushes the toothpaste from the bottom of the toothpaste thing, and one of them does it from the top. And one of them puts the toilet paper in going this way, and one goes this way. Everybody's got different things. Some are important, some are not important, but they're different. And to take people who are so different and to bring them together, and they bring them together and sustain a marriage, that's not easy. That takes work. That's why we always say you have to work on your marriage every day, right? You can't be married, for 20 years and you think, 20 years we're not going to have any problems. It's not true. Until the day you die, marriage has to be worked on. In order for it to work, it'll become like two ships passing the night, like two strangers living in the same house. If you don't work at it and try to keep your marriage fresh and try to keep it growing and try to work on oneself to make things better, if both parties do that, then marriages will work. And it's as hard to do as splitting the Red Sea. Why splitting the Red Sea specifically? Because to take two different things and to make them into one is not easy to do. Two different people, a man and a woman, they're different genders, they have different families, they have different backgrounds, they have different likes and dislikes, then to unite them as one, that's a hard thing to do. It's as hard as taking one and making it into two. taking water and splitting it into two. That's very hard to do also. That's why it uses that expression. So the lesson that we learn from that medrash is that just like with water, that if you want to split the sea, you can't just say, split it and it'll stay that way. It won't stay that way. As soon as you let go, it'll go back together. You have to constantly be conscious of that sea being split, of holding the two pieces of water apart. You have to always do it. As soon as you stop, it will go back together. And the same thing with a marriage. If you want to take two separate things and bring them together, the only way it's going to work is if you are constantly conscious of the fact that I have to work at making it one. Right? That's the only way that it could work. It doesn't mean that it'll always work, but that's the only way it could work, is to be consciously keeping in mind the importance of our working on our marriages. That's another point that they raise here in this part. So then it goes on. So we'll have to cover some of the more significant parts. So now it says they're going through the desert, right? Because Hashem doesn't want to take them to Plishtim, and the reason why he didn't want to take them to Plishtim is, of course, because he has a dilemma. God has a dilemma. The simple dilemma we saw is that if the Plishtim go to war against the Jews who were slaves for 200 years are going to say, I'm not supposed to go to war with these people. They're going to kill me. Are there enough? You took me out of Egypt because there's not enough graves in Egypt. Is that why? I'm going back to Egypt. I'd rather be a slave, right, living in Egypt than I would rather than be here and die in the desert. So God was afraid that they would do that. That's the simple understanding. But on a deeper level, we can understand it also. It says that God took them this way because to take them among the Plishtim were a corrupt people. Their lifestyle was corrupt. Their sexuality was corrupt. The way they did business was corrupt. They were not known as a moral people. And to take the Jewish people and to bring them into there was putting them in a situation that's spiritually dangerous. And that's versus by taking them through the Plishtim, that's versus the other way is to take them through the desert, which is physically dangerous. Right? So which way is God going to take them? To a way that's less physically straining, but there's spiritual pitfalls where you can become corrupt, or take you through a place where it's physically difficult, but at least you're going to have the spiritual boost from the people around you, and they're moral people, and it'll help you go. So from this we see that even though it was easier to go by way of the corrupt people, God says, no, I want to send them the other way, even though it's more difficult. Because ultimately, it might seem that it's easier to go through the Plishtim and just do like they say here. You don't like what's on my television show? Turn the channel. You don't like what we're doing? We're corrupt, so don't talk to us. Just walk through. But it's not so simple, right? Because we all like to do things that are not necessarily the right thing to do. We all have our desires. And if you're living in a country where there's no rules of marriage, and you can have relations with whoever you want, that's what's going to happen. If there's no rules of ownership, and you want to, you see a beautiful ring in the window, you can just take it. All right, we might be moral people and say, how can you say I do that? But if everyone around you is doing it, and it's legal, so then we'll do it. People will do it. So the idea being is that Hashem feels that it's more important for us even to have a more strenuous physical life in order to make sure that we're in a situation that's best for us. How this applies is, when you have a question, where am I going to live? Right? So people say to me, I have to drive on Saturday to come to shul because I live so far away. So I don't say it to people because I happen to like people and I respect people, but it enters my mind. It says, dummy, who told you to live so far away? Like, what? Why do you live so far away? You don't. I understand now you do live so far away, but when there was a day you were buying a house. You're looking for a place to live, so you could live in Scarborough or you can live in Thornhill. So living in Thornhill is got its pitfalls. It's much more expensive, and you're going to get for your $300,000 or $500,000, you're going to get a much smaller house in Thornhill than in Scarborough. But in Thornhill, you've got Jewish institutions and Jewish people, and you have kosher food, and you've got a whole Jewish life. In Scarborough, you don't have any of that. So are you going to pick the physical, right? The physical meaning you can acquire more for your money, but you'll have no spiritual or community life, or are you going to pick the community life and the spiritual life and have to put up with the hardship of getting less for your money? So when a person decides and says, I'm going to go out to Scarborough, but I don't want to give up everything, and that's reasonable. I understand you don't want to. but now you're stuck. Now you're living in the middle of nowhere, and everything's over here. So I'm not making a judgment on an individual, because the truth is that most people don't go through that thought process that I just said. Most people, they're not thinking about it. They want to get a nice house. They want to raise their family. They want to give their family the most they can. They believe, I can get more for my money in Scarborough. My family can grow up in a nicer home, so I'm going to move there. They don't think what I just went through. But the Torah does. The Torah says, I would rather send them through the desert where it's hot and it's not as good for them physically, but they'll have less chance of being corrupted than I would otherwise. It's just like, if you're gonna find a place to live and you want to live a moral life, you probably don't choose to live on the Strip in Las Vegas, or you don't choose to live in the red light district of Amsterdam. You choose to live in a place where you have the ability and a community that will help you be uplifted, even though it's up to you. Right? You have to choose what you want to do. You're responsible for yourself. But having a community is much easier. Like I tell people all the time, where many of us grew up, including myself, in small towns. And in small towns, to keep kosher is not easy. Or many other aspects of being an observant Jew are not easy in a small town. And therefore, the personal situations, the trials, the tribulations, the effort we have to put into keeping kosher in a small town is very rewarding, but it's hard. Right? Here, you can raise a child here, and they don't even have to know that they keep kosher, because you go into Sobeys now, you can't buy unkosher meat. When I first moved here, you could. They had 2 butcher areas. Now they only have 1, because now you walk into the store, and it's kosher. And when I grew up, you didn't have a kosher pizza place. You didn't have a kosher restaurant. You wanted to keep kosher. You didn't eat out. That was the end result of it. You just didn't do it. So you could go for 20 years and never eat in a restaurant. And suddenly you come here and you only have kosher pizza. I mean, there is unkosher, but you've got like 6 kosher pizza parlors in 2 kilometers. So it's a whole different life. The environment in a place where everybody is similar to you and they want to grow is going to be very different than in a place where spiritual life and Jewish life doesn't play a role. So therefore, when we make a choice, we see in the Torah, one should make a choice keeping in mind the spiritual, communal, cultural life, not just the money. And the money is not the ultimate goal. We have to also think about the choices that we make. So that just takes us out from the beginning part. Now, what happens is we get now to the splitting of the Red Sea. Pharaoh is, you can imagine this picture, if you're watching the picture, the Jewish people awaken and they look one way and they see the army of Pharaoh, and it says that he comes with 600 of his choice soldiers. That means Pharaoh himself has now abdicated from the general. Right? You have a general who runs the army, like in America, right? In the Americans, you have the president, right? And then he has people who run the army. Officially, the president is the head of the army. He's the commander-in-chief. That's his title. But you don't find the president of the United States telling the army specifically what to do. He just says, you have to go to war, and the generals figure out what to do, because they're trained in the military, but not necessarily as the president. He does everything. So it's the same thing with Pharaoh. Pharaoh is the head of the country, right? He's not the head of the army. He has people who run the army, right? But now you see suddenly Pharaoh takes the head of the army and gets rid of him, and now he's the head of the army, and he's leading the people. The top. He has like this special guard, like Saddam Hussein used to have the National Guard that was around him. They were like highly trained soldiers who were well paid, and they were taken care of, and they would put their life on the line for him, rather than the average soldier who's wearing regular clothes and has a gun from World War II and doesn't know what he's doing. Right? These guys did. And here, Pharaoh took the top soldiers from his army, and 600 of them, with their horses and with all of their personal transportation, and they went to get the Jews. So the Jews wake up and they see Pharaoh coming with these tough soldiers. And the other side, there's a sea. And that's it. I mean, it's like, it's a rock and a hard place. It's like if we stand here, Pharaoh's going to kill us, every one of us. If we go into the water, we're going to drown. So we can kill ourselves or he can kill us. Those are our choices. Either way, we're dead. And that's what they wake up to find. So they look to Moshe and they say, like, Moshe, again, were there no graves in Egypt? Like, what's going on here? Why are you sending us to die? God took us out of Egypt so we should drown? But what kind of thing is this? So Moshe knows God's going to save the Jewish people, but he doesn't know how. He doesn't know what's going to happen right at this moment. So he prays to God, and he prays to God, we got to do something. Because Moses has the understanding at this point that God is going to save the Jewish people because he wants to. But God doesn't respond that way. God is not going to save the Jewish people until the Jewish people do something. They have to show that they believe in God at this point, which should be pretty simple after going through the 10 plagues and leaving Egypt and all the miracles that they saw. That you have to show that you believe I'm going to save you, that I promised you, and you trust me. And as soon as you show me you trust me, I'll save you. So he tells Moshe, what are you praying about? That's what he said. Moshe prays, he says, cut it out. There's no time for prayer. The God tells him. It's time to act. All right? If you don't act, you're going to be dead. Go into the water, he tells them. So he's telling the Jewish people, go into the water. You're going to drown yourself. And if they don't believe that God's going to save them, they're going to drown. So go into the water. And it says that the first person in, his name was Nachshon ben Aminadab, Nachshon went in. He was the first one in, and it says that he went in until the water went over his nose. That means he was going to die, right? He couldn't breathe. As soon as the water hit his nose, God split the sea. Because God wanted it that you should understand, I've done all of this for you. Because the only time in history God reveals himself, like you remember we said before, people always say, if God can take that eyeglass case and just lift it up 3 inches, I'll believe in him. Go ahead. That's all I'm asking. And I'm not going to ask again. Just make that eyeglass case go up in the air. He's not going to do it. He's not. God is not a circus freak. He's going to do whatever you tell him. God did it already. He went one time, and he says, I'm going to do it once. I'm going to show the world that I exist. And from there on in, right, you're going to have to know that this is true. But I'm not going to do this every generation for every person who asks. You know that I'm doing it. And this is where he does it. And the whole story, the Jews coming out of Egypt, is God exposing himself again and again and again and again. And now he says, this is the last time. I've done it for you 10 times. Right? To you. I've done it for you. You were there. You saw the 10 plagues. You were a slave. You are now free. You are now leaving Egypt. Nobody has ever left Egypt before. You're the only ones that do it. And you did it clearly because I got it to happen, is God saying. He says, now, you think I really took you out of Egypt so you should die here? I promised you. I'm taking you out of Egypt. I'm taking you to the land of Israel. I promised it. And I'm fulfilling my promise. You got to show me that you believe in me. That you believe I'm going to do it. I've already proved it 10 times. Now it's your turn. So as soon as the Jews went into the water, they said, God says, okay, now I know you believe in me, and he splits the sea. Right? And then, even more miraculous than splitting the sea is that when the Jews went through the sea, and they start coming out on the other side, well, it's actually the same side. If you ever look at it, they go like this in half a circle. They end up on the same side, just further down. It says that when they came out, so they were fine. But what does Pharaoh do? He's no dummy. I'm going to go after him. If the sea split, it's because nature made it split. It just happens to be, at this moment, they happen to be here because he didn't believe in our God. So he goes in after them. So the amazing thing is that every single Jew got out without being wet. And as soon as Pharaoh was in, the water closed and killed them all. And every one of them drowned. And it says, other than Pharaoh. All the rest of them drowned. So you see, from here you see an amazing miracle. Not only is it a miracle that he split the sea, but that he closed the sea at the exact moment where he could kill all of the Egyptians and all the Jews were free. And it says that many things happened. There are many, many miracles in this whole story of the sea. One of which was when Pharaoh came with all of these choice people. These were well-paid soldiers. They had a lot of wealth. They had a lot of people say that they had a lot of gold on their chariots. They were royalty. They were special people. So it says that all of the wealth that was with them all came to the top of the water and washed to the side of the sand, on the side of the sea, and the Jews gathered the wealth again because God promised they'd be wealthy, and he keeps giving them more and more wealth. So it says the Jews are running around grabbing all the wealth at the side of the sea, and Moshe is taking Yosef with him. And that's what this means. So that's where we are now. And so the Jews are going into the sea at this point, right, with Pharaoh coming after them. And now what happens is the famous song. What I said to you takes us up the next few pages. And then we get to 375, and we have what's called the Song of the Sea. Now we have to understand what that is. It's not like they decided that, we're going to be saved, so we're going to hire an entertainer to sing a song. This was a spontaneous spiritual reaction where the people were so spiritually lifted by what they experienced. You can imagine how you would feel. You know how you see it in a movie or sadly maybe in your own life. They have a terrible car accident and everybody around you is hurt and you walk out fine. Is that like it's amazing. How did I walk out fine? Or even if nobody's hurt, you all walk out fine. And you say, look at this car. How is it possible that I lived? And you do, and you live, and you have no injuries. So a person who does that has this amazingly uplifting feeling, like something happened here, and you feel it inside of you. So the Jews just went through this whole thing. They finally come to the realization that God did this for us. Now, God did this whole long story, going out of Egypt, going to the Red Sea. This going into the sea is such a spiritual thing, because you can imagine a sea. We're not talking about a pool in someone's backyard or a little tub of water. We're talking about like an ocean. Suddenly splits, and the ground is dry at the bottom, and they can walk through it. Right? It's an amazing thing. It's almost beyond our comprehension to even imagine this happening. And they're experiencing this, so they spontaneously broke into song. And they all had within them, it says, the same feelings. And therefore the song was, the nation sang the song. Now, that's simply understood. But if we look at the words on the bottom of 374 and 375, then Moses and the children of Israel chose to sing the song to Hashem. In the Hebrew, it doesn't really say that. It's the last line on 374. It says, Az Yashir Moshe V'nei Yisrael. Now, this is actually in our prayer books. We say it every day, every Shabbos. This song that they sang, we say it. But the word Az Yashir is translated as that then the Moshe and the children of Israel chose to sing the song. Right? Az Yashir is chose to sing the song, but it's not true. It's translated simply, but it's translated incorrectly. Az Yashir means, and then they will sing. Future tense. Right? Not that they sang or that they are singing, which is what happened. Right? When we read this, they sang. It's past tense. When they say it, we are singing. Here it says they will sing. And the reason is because this is a hint. There are times it says that the Torah never talks about the coming of the Mashiach, and the Torah never talks about what's going to happen spiritually in the future. We don't have it blatant. Like you don't see in the Torah, if you do this, this, and this, the Mashiach will come, and what the Mashiach is and who it is. There's no mention of the Mashiach. There's no mention of the world to come in the Torah, but it's hinted, and this is one of the hints. That it says Moshe and the Jewish people will sing. When will they sing? Well, Moshe will be dead in a few years, right? If we read the Torah, and then all the Jewish people that were there at the splitting of the Red Sea, they all die before they get to Israel. They're all dead. None of them get into Israel at the end. So when are they going to sing? So it says that they're going to sing at Tchias HaMesim, at the revival of the dead. That a certain point in history will come where Hashem will take all of those who are deceased and He'll bring them back to life. How and what that means exactly, I can't say. But it means to tell us that Moshe and the Jewish people will again sing when they see a miracle as big as this, which will be, the miracle will be after the Mashiach comes, what the world will be like. And that's what they're going to sing. So this is a hint, the Talmud says, to the fact that there is a world to come and there is a Messianic era, because otherwise this sentence doesn't make sense. As most of the Jewish people will sing. When they translate it here, then they did sing. So what they're doing is that there's in English we don't have this type of grammar, but in French they do. They have one called passé composé, which is a type of grammar which is where you're speaking on a past tense, but you refer to it in the future tense, because it's like it's happening. I'm about to sing, right? But when I'm reading it, he's saying already. So this form of grammar we don't have in English, so we can't really explain it. But the fact is, when it says they will sing, is definitely to hint to us that in the future they'll sing. But it's also on the simple level, because the Torah has to be understood on the simple level as well. It means that they did sing. And there is a grammatical concept of that. It's just we don't have it in English, so it's not as easy to see. So it says that, and then they will sing, most of the Jewish people will sing this song. And we have this long song where it talks about what happened in the splitting of the sea. And it says that Pharaoh's chariots came and he threw them into the sea. Now, some of these are hints at other things. Like, for instance, it has one place it says, they descended into the depths like stone. And another place it says that they were like reeds, like from the reed sea. What happens with it? What's a reed? It's like a straw, like a natural straw. So what happens when you put that in water? It floats, right? It floats on top of water. Straw floats. So, but if you have turbulent water, so the straw will go down and come up and down and up and down and up because it naturally floats. But the power of the water will push it down. So one place it says the Egyptians, when they were in the sea, were like a stone. In other words, like a human body will float, right? At first, if you go into water, you'll usually float. When you lose your air, right, and you start to drown, or a person starts to drown, they sink. Because now their body, it doesn't have air in it, and it sinks in the water. But while you have air in your lungs, you can float, right? Or you can do things to make yourself float. So what happens to the Egyptians? So in one place it says they sunk like rocks. In another place it says they floated like the straw. And so the Medrash tells us that both were true. That both the Egyptians sunk like rocks and floated like straw. What does it mean? It says the evil ones, the evil Egyptians, because not every Egyptian was bad. The ones who were bad, they were like straw. They floated. The ones who were good, they sank like a rock. So you say, well, that's also backwards. If somebody was bad, they should sink like a rock and drown, and the ones who are good should float. It says, but that's not the case. What they're saying is they all died. All the Egyptians drowned. So there's two ways of drowning, right? Like anything else. They're basically, if a person drowns immediately, they immediately fall into the water, and just water into their lungs, and they die in a few seconds. That's one way. And not that it's a nice way to die, but that's one way. The other way is that you go into the water, and you get a little bit of air, and then you sink to the bottom, and then you're in pain, and then the water pushes you back to the top, and you get a little bit more air, and then you sink to the bottom again. It's like torture, up and down and up and down and up and down, until finally you die. That's much more painful. So the Medrash says that the Jews are describing, not only did God split the sea, God punished every individual based on what that individual did. He didn't just kill all the Egyptians the same. Some Egyptians were not that bad. Some of them were terrible. The ones who were terrible, their death was painful. The ones who weren't terrible, they died, but not painfully. So you see the reference to that in here. There's constant references, because what the Jewish people are doing is, this song is basically prophecy. They're prophesizing. They're expressing things, right, that are not clear by looking. Like if you look, you imagine the Jews come out of the water, look behind us, and there's the Egyptians going to the water. Now they're going, oh no, right? But we thought we were safe, and here they come, right? And then the water closes on them, right? So that's what they saw. But they didn't necessarily see this Egyptian from on the other side of the sea going up and down, or this one sinking. That was prophetic. That they got from their closeness to God through a prophecy. They were able to understand what was happening and to see it. So you have reference after reference in very specific terms as to what happens to all the different people, and it goes through it all. And then the Song of the Sea ends. At this part, and then the second part of it is that Miriam, who is Moshe's sister, she leads the women as they go into the sea. The women are with Moshe's sister, and they're also singing and they're playing tambourines. It says as they go into the water, and as they're going out of the water, because they also were celebrating. And here we see a number of interesting points. Well, one has to understand who was Miriam. Miriam, of course, was the girl who really much of the Jews coming out of Egypt was because of her. Because, every time the Jews are redeemed, it's always a woman who causes it. The story of Hanukkah is because of a woman, and the story of Passover, we see, we're going to explain a bit of it here, why. And we have it in every case. Every time the Jews are in a real difficult situation where they're going to have to get out or they're gone, it's a woman who causes it to happen, who saves them. Every time in history. You have Esther does it. Right? You have it in Hanukkah, it was Yehudis. You have every single time. So Miriam, right? Miriam, we know originally her father Avram, the head of the Jews, said the Jews are not going to get no more marriage because you're going to have children. You're going to bring children into a world where they're slaves, and we don't want this anymore. So I am decreeing that Jews are no longer allowed to get married. And Miriam, his daughter, says to him, you're worse than Pharaoh. Pharaoh wants to kill the boys, right? He wanted to kill the Jewish boys by drowning them. But you want to kill the boys and the girls. So you're worse than Pharaoh. She tells her own father, who was the head of the Jews. He realizes she's right. So he says that people can get married, and you should have children, and even if they're brought into slavery, God promised we're going to come out. We're going to hope for the best. So number one is, you only had more children, including Moshe himself was only born after this, and you have only the Jewish nation here to exist because of her. Right? So Miriam plays a very significant role. Miriam and Moshe and Aaron, those three being from that family, play very important roles. Usually Miriam's role is with the women, that she works very closely with the women, and there is without question a bond between women that does not exist across gender between men and women. There is something extraordinary that are just with women, and we see her leading the women in the same way that Moshe leads the men. They're really leading the nation together, but the Torah tells us in this way. We find many references, by the way, throughout the Torah where either Miriam or her husband take a very, very leading role. And Miriam's husband only gets this job because of her. In other words, it's her husband, and because it's her husband, he gets the job, not because of who he is on his own. Not that he was a nobody, he was a significant person, but Miriam was really the brains behind it. She was the one.
Rabbi, I thought she was the first one to go into the sea.
No, she wasn't. The first one was Nachshon. So she led the women, but that was all. So then we got to the end of that, and it says they come out. Right, they come out, and what goes on. So we have this next section, which we can't really say much of because I don't want to keep you late, but it talks about the Jews coming out. The first thing that we have is that they're complaining. Right? It sounds like they must come to our shul, or any shul, where people always have complaints. Right? So they're complaining. Because what happens, they come out, imagine, here they are, they're slaves for 200 years, right? They come out of there, there's all of these wonders, amazing miracles. They go through the splitting of the Red Sea, an amazing miracle. They get out in the desert and there's nothing to drink. They're going to die. So they say the same thing. Were there not enough graves in Egypt? You're going to kill us? That's how Jews are, right? We always got to have a wisecrack. So there's not enough graves in Egypt, Moshe? You have to take us out of Egypt so we'll starve to death out here in the desert? Right? So it says that they came out, there wasn't enough water. So we have this whole section where Moshe speaks to God, and we need water. So it says that Hashem says, I heard the complaints of the children of Israel. Say to them, in the afternoon you shall have meat, and they have a place where they should have water, and he gives them. But this section is called the complainers. And this is a very significant point, that the Jews don't just go along for the ride. Right? The fact that we think that Jews are tough, and Jews have a stiff neck, and Jews are difficult often, I hear from people who work in Jewish work, how difficult it is. It's true. We are difficult. It doesn't mean we're not good people, and we're caring, and we want the best for everyone, and we do amazing things. When you start seeing the Jewish Federation raising as much money as United Way, you know that there's something special about the Jews, right? Because United Way is everybody, and the Jewish Federation is just the Jews. So if we can raise as much money in a city as the whole United Way, you know there's something special. And we know they're special, but without a question, Jews complain. And it's a part of our nature, and it's one of the reasons God sent us to Egypt, is so that we could be tough. Because we have to go through a tough life as Jews. We have to lead the world, and that's not easy. So the fact that the Jews are like this is perfectly logical, that we should be tough. That's why it says that one of the reasons it says that we eat eggs like at special occasions, like at a funeral, after a funeral, is because the more you cook an egg, the harder it gets. Right? The more trouble you give a Jew, the tougher we get. But you push a Jew to, right? What are they going to do? They're going to push back. You push them harder, they'll push back harder. They don't just stop. Okay? That's just how we are. That's called being stiff-necked, or it's the word that we invented, which is chutzpah. That's what that means. So we see here. So the Jews are being chutzpahdik to Moshe and God, saying, hey, you take us out of Egypt so we should die in the desert. What's with this water? This water that you bring us to is bitter. We can't drink it. And there's no meat. All right? Now these are slaves, right? And they say there's no meat. They complain. So God does it. God sends them. God tolerates it, and so does Moshe. Now Moshe does have a point where he he gets angry at the Jews, and we'll see that later on. And because he gets angry, he's punished. Because a leader has to realize that that's what happens. A parent realizes with their kids, and a leader of a community realizes that in my position, I know that I will have people who will be complaining. I have to know how to accept a complaint and how to listen to it and how to be able to evaluate it. But the one important thing is that we always see here is that you validate it. You treat people with respect.